The National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa has accused the African Union, or rather has called on the African Union to intervene in the political crisis in Zimbabwe. Numsa was holding a picket outside the Zimbabwean embassy in Pretoria against what it terms Zimbabwe's authoritarian regime. That government has been accused of human rights abuses in a crackdown in recent months. Joining us now to discuss the union's strategy on Zimbabwe is spokesperson Phakamile Hlubi. Phakamile, good evening, and thank you very much for your time tonight. First and foremost, when we look at the situation in Zimbabwe, we will have to ask, is there a crisis in Zimbabwe, and what is that specific crisis that requires a resolution?
Good evening, and good evening to your listeners, Thabo. As far as we're concerned, as Numsa, there definitely is a crisis in Zimbabwe. I think it's common knowledge that there's an economic crisis that's been in place for quite some time now, where there's food shortages and shortages of basic essentials. But that economic crisis has been sparked by deep problems within the ZANU-PF government, where they have where basically they've been exposed. They've been exposed as a government that has in no way is serving the interests of the masses. This is a government which has been serving its own interests. Even Robert Mugabe's land policy was not for the benefit of the masses of Zimbabwe. The elite, the ZANU-PF elite, were the ones who benefited from that land policy. So what you're seeing here is a liberation movement that came to power off the back of the support of the working class. Once it arrived in power, it betrayed the working class and started serving its own narrow political interests. And instead of dealing decisively and confronting these challenges, the ZANU-PF government has been attacking citizens. It's been violating human rights. People are getting arrested on a daily basis and harassed just for speaking out against the government's policies.
Yeah, but ZANU-PF would tell you that they believe they are representing the interest of the people, and there are those in Zimbabwe who are spreading fake news. In fact, you all know that the president has sent 2 envoys to Zimbabwe. Both of them have failed because they ran into trouble when they got to Zimbabwe, because ZANU-PF says there is no crisis here. You are victims of fake news that are being spread around on social media by those who supported President Robert Mugabe and don't want to give this regime support, and in fact they are spreading fake news about him. And what do you say to that?
Was the arrest of Hopo Chinono fake news? Was the arrest of Titi Dangaremba fake news? Was the violent sexual assault of MDC MPs fake news? I mean, I think it's disgraceful that is the stance of ZANU-PF against very, very clear massive violations of human rights which are taking place there. Our own comrades, alliance people that we have in Zimbabwe, those that we have relationships with, tell us reports about what's taking place there and how trade unionists are being victimized. So we know very well what's going on, and we're not going to listen to the propaganda of ZANU-PF.
But is that not then precisely the problem, Phakamile, that ZANU-PF is not in agreement that there is such a problem? How does the African Union, how does South Africa, how does any country intervene in the affairs of that country when the governing party does not want to admit that there is a crisis in the nation?
But ZANU-PF is behaving like the apartheid government behaved when they were confronted with the abuses of black people in this country. That's precisely how they are responding. They're responding like a typical autocratic, despotic regime that's got something to hide. And the reason that the South African government failed to intervene is because the South African government has lost all moral authority when it comes to the issue of Zimbabwe. The situation in Zimbabwe, when South Africans look at Zimbabwe, they must know that they're looking at their future here in South Africa. It's exactly the same situation where you have liberation movements that failed to transform the economy for the benefit of the masses. And now when it's become very clear that the system that they've got in place cannot transform and change the lives in of the working class in a radical and meaningful way. In the case of Zimbabwe, they've responded with repression and crackdowns. So that's why the South African government failed to make any impact.
But it is the South African president who is the AU chair, who you're saying the AU must intervene. What credibility will he have to intervene in the Zimbabwean situation? Mind you, the AU has been described by others as a toothless dog when it comes to Zimbabwe. The AU, for example, has outlawed coups, generally. But Mnangagwa's government, by whatever description you want to call it, is a military government that was born out of a coup.
And the AU has exposed itself as an organization that's furthering its own narrow interests. And this is why we've said, as amongst the demands that we submitted today, was that if the AU wants to demonstrate that it really isn't that type of factional organization serving only the narrow interests of the political elite, then it won't have a problem with assisting and intervening in the situation. One of the demands we've made, for example, is that there should be an independent investigation that takes place in Zimbabwe, looking at ZANU-PF and its activities, looking at what's taken place and how human rights abuses have taken place. And if there's a case to answer, then Mnangagwa must be tried for crimes against humanity.
What has happened to the Khalima Motlanthe inquiry? What has happened to the Khalima Motlanthe inquiry, to the violence in Zimbabwe?
Well, as I said, if you are depending on South Africa, you're going to run into a problem, because South Africa itself is not really able to push a clear agenda on Zimbabwe because of the fact that it has its own contradictions which prevent it from being able to do so effectively. Ultimately, though, the real change that's going to take place in Zimbabwe is going to take place from the working class. The working class is going to have to unite, and is going to have to organize itself and push an agenda for itself. What's been happening, even post-independence in Zimbabwe, is that those that have taken power have done so in their own interests. And if there's going to be any genuine change taking place, it will require the working class to drive that agenda.
What will bring Mnangagwa to come and sit or even negotiate with the opposition at this point?
Well, I think for us, it's much more than Mnangagwa sitting and having negotiations with the opposition. That's, of course, one of the things he could do if he wanted to create a progressive atmosphere for political engagement to take place. We've said, for example, in our demands that the government of Zimbabwe has to create an environment of free expression, where political parties can contest, where activists and journalists can work freely without being harassed or without being assaulted or without unlawful detention. Trade unionists must be able to do the work of defending workers on the shop floor without fear of victimization, harassment, or detention. We need a complete shift in what's been taking place at the moment, because any kind of dissent or anything that's viewed as dissent from the Zimbabwe government at the moment results in severe crackdowns by state security on those who dare to make those declarations.
So that means the politics of Zimbabwe, in a sense, have got to be demilitarized, because it is said, and I'm sure your experts on the ground would tell you, that the military pretty much calls the shots at this point.
We even said the time when the coup took place and everybody was celebrating that Mugabe is gone, so, things are wonderful in Zimbabwe. We were saying that there's no way the story is going to end well, because history has taught us that when the military takes over, they are often far worse than any civilian administration that governs a country at that time. And unfortunately, we've been proven to be correct. The repression has intensified in Zimbabwe, particularly under the rule of Mnangagwa. It is not just enough for Mnangagwa to go. ZANU-PF must go. The capitalist system must go. The working class in Zimbabwe should fight for genuine socialism, genuine equality, and genuine democracy for all.
Talk to me about what the role of Liberation Movement Solidarity is playing here. We saw the ANC also going to Zimbabwe and unable to do anything really, and South Africa in itself unable to act in any form or harsh form towards Zimbabwe at this particular point.
I think it's really important for organizations like ours and other civil society groupings and working class formations to come out very publicly and openly to defend Zimbabweans, to defend human rights in that country. We were assisted during the dark days of apartheid by reaching out to other progressive formations. The pressure that was on the apartheid government was in part caused by the massive support and mobilization that took place overseas, where people were strongly pushing for an end to apartheid through boycotts, through protests, and that's the kind of thing that has to happen here. There was a time when Zimbabwe was actually our ally in the struggle against apartheid. And it's ironic now that the working class has to come together again and support Zimbabweans during their time of need. But it is important and we must do it.